You know, it all started one godforsaken night at exactly 3:30 in the morning when I got yanked out of a dead sleep by this relentless banging on my front door, like someone was trying to break it down with their bare fists. And there was this high-pitched yelling that pierced right through the walls, making my heart pound like I'd just run a marathon. I stumbled to the window, peering through the blinds, and there she was, Susan, the self-appointed overlord of our little suburban HOA in this quiet corner of Austin, Texas, standing there in her fancy robe with two of her snooty friends shivering behind her, all lit up by the street lamp like some bizarre midnight drama. She was screaming at me to move my old pickup truck from my own damn driveway because her distinguished guests needed the spot, and before I could even rub the sleep from my eyes, red and blue lights flashed up the block. Yep, she'd called the cops on me for parking on my property. I threw on a hoodie, cracked the door, and there she was, reeking of that overpowering floral perfume, jabbing her finger at me like I'd stolen her crown jewels. How dare you hog that space when my friends drove all the way from downtown? This is a community emergency, and you're being selfish, downright hostile. Her voice cracked with that mix of entitlement and fury, her friends shifting awkwardly like they wished the ground would swallow them whole. The cop, this tired-looking guy named Officer Ramirez, stepped in with a sigh, asked if the truck was mine, and when I nodded, he just shook his head with this half-smile like he'd seen this movie before. Susan launched into her tirade about HOA rules giving her the right to reallocate resources for harmony's sake. Harmony, as if her power trip was some noble quest. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about parking. It was about control, about her needing to flex her muscles because she'd clawed her way to HOA president by bullying folks over stupid stuff like lawn ornaments or paint shades, and me not budging threatened her little empire. The neighbors started peeking out, phones in hand, recording the spectacle as Susan waved her arms wildly at my truck, calling it a neighborhood eyesore that sabotaged her late-night soiree. Her friends had apparently overstayed at some wine tasting, and she couldn't stand the idea of them walking an extra block. Officer Ramirez pinched the bridge of his nose, turned to her real slow, and said, "Ma'am, this is private property, his driveway, his rules. Calling 911 for this? That's not what emergencies are for." She gasped like he'd slapped her, stomping her feet and vowing to take it to the board, her eyes burning with that petty rage as she herded her friends away, muttering threats under her breath. I shut the door, heart still racing, but instead of anger, this weird resolve settled in. I wasn't going to let some control freak dictate my life, not when I'd bought this house to escape the city chaos, to have a slice of peace where I could park my beat-up truck without a second thought. By morning, the whole street was buzzing, folks whispering over coffee about Susan's meltdown, some chuckling, others warning me she'd come back swinging because she'd once fined a guy into moving out over a bird feeder. Sure enough, a notice slapped on my door that afternoon, summoning me to an emergency HOA meeting at the community center, accusing me of disrupting communal access or some nonsense. I dug out the bylaws binder, thick as a phone book, full of rules that screamed micromanagement, and highlighted the part where driveways are explicitly private, no ifs or buts. Walking into that packed room felt like stepping into a courtroom, Susan perched at the front, like a judge in her pearls, smirking as she painted me as the villain who hated unity, her voice dripping with fake concern. He's tearing at the fabric of our neighborhood, refusing to share when we all know parking's tight. But I stood up, binder in hand, and laid it out calm as could be, quoting the rules word for word, watching her face twist as the crowd murmured. Then the unexpected happened. Old Mr. Thompson from down the block, this quiet retiree who'd never said boo at meetings, stood up shaky at first, saying, "Susan's been on my case, too, fining me for my RV in my garage because it clashed with aesthetics. It's harassment. Plain and simple." One by one, others chimed in. Mrs. Patel about trash bin fines, young couple about holiday lights, turning the tide, voices rising until Susan was shouting to be heard, her control slipping like sand. The president banged the gavel, ruled no violation, and as Susan stormed out hissing, "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me." I felt this spark ignite inside, not just defiance, but a sense of solidarity with these folks who'd been cowed for years by her games, all rooted in her insecurity from losing a board election once and vowing never to feel powerless again. But Susan didn't back down. She amped it up, sending bogus notices about my truck stagnating or leaving unsightly marks, inventing rules to wear me down, her motive clear. She saw me as a threat to her authority, especially after I'd embarrassed her publicly. I fought back smarter, installing cameras that caught her skulking around at night with a flashlight, peering at my property like a spy, footage I saved with a grin, labeling it Susan's Nocturnal Adventures. When she showed up with her cronies, pointing at imaginary oil leaks, I pulled out my phone, showed the live feed, and said coolly, "Smile for the camera, Susan. This is all documented." Her eyes widened. She snapped, "That's invasion of privacy. You're a menace." But her friends backed off, mumbling excuses, leaving her fuming alone. The harassment escalated, false noise complaints bringing cops back, who rolled their eyes and warned her about wasting resources. Anonymous notes in my mailbox reeking of her perfume, threatening fines. Online rants in the neighborhood forum calling me a hoarder of space. It stung, made me question if standing firm was worth the stress. But each time I looked at my truck sitting there innocent, it reminded me of why I fought. For the principle, for not letting her manipulate the community out of her need to dominate, born from some deep-seated grudge against anyone who didn't bow. I rallied allies like Mr. Thompson. We swapped stories over beer, building a file of her abuses, turning isolation into strength. Then came her big bash, this flashy block party she hyped as the HOA's crown jewel, lights strung up, music thumping, cars jamming the street. I'd prepped with bollards blocking my drive, removable posts that said hands off, without a word. When her guests tried pulling in, I waved them off politely, but Susan charged over, sequins glittering, clipboard waving. "Remove those now. This is an event for everyone, and you're ruining it on purpose." I crossed my arms, smiled. Private property, remember? Board already ruled. Chaos erupted, cars towed for blocking hydrants, her slipping on the curb mid-rant, splashing into a puddle as neighbors laughed outright, phones capturing her soaked and sputtering. Her party crumbled, guests fleeing, and as she glared at me from her yard, venom in her eyes, I sipped my drink on the porch, feeling the shift, her power cracking, the neighborhood exhaling. But she sued me next, dragging us to small claims over easement violations and emotional distress, her lawyer droning on about harmony while she nodded smugly. I showed up with bylaws, videos, witnesses, Mr. Thompson testifying to her patterns, Mrs. Patel adding her fine story, and the judge, after watching footage of her midnight creeps, slammed it down. "Case dismissed. This borders on stalking, ma'am," Susan exploded. "This is injustice. You're all against me." But the gavel fell, and walking out to backslaps from neighbors, I felt vindicated, though wary. She'd lost face, and that fueled her fire more than anything. In a bold twist, when she tried buying the empty lot next door to turn into overflow parking, just to spite me, I swooped in, outbid her, deed in hand. She stormed over, screeching, "That's my lot, you thief!" I held up the papers. "Mine now, Susan. Fair and square." I fenced it high, added sprinklers that doused her trespassing guests mid-party, soaking dresses and egos alike, footage going viral in our chat group, memes flying. Her complaints bounced, her influence tanked, parties flopped, until the cops finally cited her for harassment, cuffing her amid her wails. "I'm the victim here. You'll pay for this." She moved out soon after, truck hauling her stuff away as we watched. A quiet triumph. Now, with new folks in her house, nice family, kids laughing on the lawn, the streets alive, peaceful in a way it hadn't been. My truck's still there, a badge of that wild ride from one petty spat to toppling a tyrant. But here's the thing that nags at me. Was it all black and white? Or did I push too far, turning her desperation into my victory? What do you think? Have you dealt with a Susan in your life? Was standing ground worth the chaos? Or should folks just move on for peace? Drop a comment, share your stories. I'd love to hear if justice always feels this messy, or if community's about drawing lines versus blurring them. Hit like if this hit home, subscribe for more Real Talk tales.